Hey everyone, and welcome back to... I was going to throw those, but they actually cost me like £20. I'm back. I've been away for a wee bit, everyone. It's been kind of like a busy couple of months, I'm not going to lie. But it's also been a busy month of reading. I read 7 books this month. And I got like halfway through Inherent Vice by Thomas Pynchon, and then July happened, so that was fun. However, we've got some books to talk about here tonight, people. But yes, I'm back, I'm alive. It's been a while, and it's like 11 in the morning, so please excuse my energy. So without further ado, let's get started. Get right into these. There's no sense wasting your time. You've got busy lives. I have not. I read 7 books this month. So, started the month off right with a self-help book. Surrounded by Idiots by Thomas Erickson. Surrounded by Idiots is basically like, it's a book about the 4 different types of human behaviour and trying to understand them. Which may seem like an oversimplification of things, but it's actually like fairly decent in explaining very core levels of human behaviour. It doesn't go into too much detail, but the fundamentals are there. These 4 types of human behaviour are split into 4 colours. You got red, you get yellow, you get blue and green. Red is a sort of assertive, dominant type. Yellow is a creative charbox. Green is just like a nice, chilled out, good pal type character. And blue is Ethan Kerr. The thing that I enjoyed the most about this book was just like, first of all, it helped me to understand things my friends do a lot easier. I think one of the biggest takeaway points is that just because someone does something different to you does not mean that they're worse than you, which isn't a problem like I would have said I struggled with, but also I feel like I was very quick to brand someone else's, if someone's behaviour was different to mine, then that automatically made them weird. But yeah, it's a fairly solid book. There's also a sequel called Surrounded by Psychopaths, which I also own and I'm planning to read this month, so stay tuned for that. I really loved the way that this book goes into not only the core behaviour types, but also the relationships and ways that they could be strained between certain types of characters. And yeah, I had some like just interesting conversations with my friends, thinking like, oh, are you blue? Am I green? You know, but hey, I've not got a lot to say about it, to be completely honest. 7 out of 10, baby. Fairly solid little non-fiction book to start off the month. The only non-fiction book I read actually this month, so I don't know what that says about me. Possibly that I just don't enjoy reading non-fiction as much as fiction, or something along those lines. Also, my dad has decided to de-wallpaper our walls, which is quite the casual act of terrorism. The audacity for him to de-wallpaper our walls while I'm trying to become an internet celebrity. Next up, and a desperate bid to understand the postmodern fiction movement, I read probably the most prominent example of postmodern literature, or I would say maybe the most historically famous example, which is Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, and I loved it, of course, because it's postmodern fiction and it's my favourite genre. It's quite a short book, even though there's a lot going on, it is fairly brief, but I think if it dragged on too much longer, it would probably get really stale. Essentially what Slaughterhouse-Five is, I'm going to try really, really hard to explain the plot of this to you, and probably fail, but here we go. Essentially what Slaughterhouse-Five is it's the story of a prisoner of war named Billy Pilgrim, who is essentially fighting in the Second World War, I believe, and he gets taken as a prisoner of war. During his time as a prisoner of war, how many times am I going to say prisoner of war? Holy shit. During his time as a prisoner of war, he starts to sort of, I guess, hallucinate that he's been like abducted by aliens called the Tralfamadorians, I think they were called. It's been a while since I've read this, but I'm almost positive that's what they were called, because we're from a planet called Tralfamador. They were doing experiments on him and stuff, and they were keeping him in a sort of space alien zoo. They were sort of conducting experiments on him, and they gave him this prostitute, sex worker type porn star woman to mate with. And during all this time, Billy is hiding out in a slaughterhouse during the bombing of Dresden, which is a famous bombing in the Second World War that I actually didn't know about until I read this book. So that was like a nice second part of my experience with Slaughterhouse-Five. And if that sounds like an incredibly confusing and badly translated description of the plot, that's kind of not on me. That's just the plot. But it's a really fascinating and I would say powerful social commentary on the effects of war, both emotionally and, you know, as a society, as a country. It's basically praised as one of the great anti-war novels, and I think I can absolutely see why it's not only very gripping and funny, and it's really just interesting. But it has a lot to say, and I think I would highly encourage, even if you're not into postmodern fiction, I would highly encourage anyone that's interested in wartime fiction, even though this wasn't written during the war, but it's about the war. I would highly encourage anyone who's interested in that kind of subgenre to pick this one up. 9 out of 10, baby. On 1 year. Yes, I actually read a book on. No, I didn't. It's right here. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Next up, I read, and I'm gonna butcher this guy's name big time here, so please bear with me. Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. Lolita is quite famously a book that was banned from a number of schools and stuff because of its subject matter. It was also turned into a really fairly good Stanley Kubrick movie, so I would recommend checking that one out too, guys. Essentially what Lolita is about is the story of a man named Humbert, who is a sort of scholar type guy who has developed this sort of romantic connection with a certain age range of girls. I think it was between like the ages of 8 and 14 or something, but he names them nymphets, and he sees them as these sort of like sinful but kind of like lusty and basically like little teases essentially, and he kind of sees himself as a sort of victim to their power. Think Frollo and the Hunchback of Notre Dame, you know. So Humbert falls in love with his land. He moves into this bed and breakfast type little place, and he essentially falls in love with his landlady's daughter, who's named Dolores, but he names her Lolita. So he marries his landlady in an effort to get together with, or to have sexual relationships with, this 13-year-old Lolita. And essentially he comes to realize that he doesn't want to be married to this woman anymore. So he tells her that he's in love with her daughter, and then the woman dies, and then he kidnaps Lolita and they go on a road trip across America. Feel good, you know, it's a happy story. What is absolutely just so unique about this book is that it's tackling a really disturbing subject matter. I feel like I can't really say anything about this book that hasn't already been said a million times, so I'll keep it kind of brief. Although it tackles this really strange and disturbing and depraved subject matter, paedophilia, obviously, noncery, it's written in such a compelling and beautiful way that I think that what Nabokov is going for is that he wants you to sympathize with the protagonist. And as far as, you know, I'm concerned, sympathizing with a paedophile, probably not the best thing to do. The whole draw of this book is that it really sucks you in and makes you feel for Humbert, which is terrifying. Like, that is absolutely terrifying to think about. But I think that's such a testament to the quality of Vladimir Nabokov's writing, is that's insane. That is absolutely insane. He has the power to make us sympathize with that kind of character. Well done. I don't know if I should be saying well done, but, you know, congratulations, I guess. It's really one of a kind. I've never read anything like it. Very disturbing, and it really is poignant. It really stuck with me after reading it for a couple of days. Thanks to this book, I actually was in a reading slump after Slaughterhouse 5 just because I was so busy. So thanks to Lolita for getting me out of my reading slump, because I then read like 3 books that week. Absolutely loved it. 9 out of 10, baby. Another classic that you may have read in school. I know a lot of people that did this for their dissertations in Advanced Higher English, and that is The Bell Jar by Mrs. Sylvia Plath. And I absolutely loved it. So compelling, and the characters are so well written, and it reminds me of The Catcher in the Rye, which is my favourite book of all time. It's essentially about Esther Greenwood, who is an intern working at a magazine in like the 1950s in New York. Just the sort of trials and tribulations of lots of different things, being a woman, and the fact that she feels desensitized and sort of she's struggling with a bit of derealization in her life, and she struggles to understand people, and it kind of reminds me a wee bit of The Humans by Matt Haig in that sort of dehumanization type of way, and it handles mental health really well. I kind of went into it expecting it to be a lot more feminism heavy than it was, which isn't a problem at all. Like, some of my favorite books are very feminism heavy, but it's actually very subtle in its approach, which I think is quite admirable, especially for something like this that tackles like major themes of female mental health. And that's kind of all I want to say about it. I just think you should go and read it. It's like £3-4 on Amazon. Just go and read The Bell Jar. It's a classic for all the right reasons. It's so powerful, and I cried. Twice, actually. It's just so powerful, guys. It captures loneliness perfectly, and in a way that I don't think, with the exception of The Catcher in the Rye, any other book has ever done for me, ever. Well, maybe My Year of Rest and Relaxation, which is also an excellent book that I plan on rereading. I highly recommend you all go read it. But The Bell Jar, guys, go and read it. It's absolutely fantastic. 10 out of 10, baby. Let's go. So, I wanted to take a little break from paper for a while. So, naturally, got my Kindle over here, and I decided to read 2 books. Well, I set out to read one, and then one I just kind of impromptu read. And that book was The Troop by Nick Cutter. And I'm just going to say this now, guys. The next, pretty much, I think the entire rest of the month was A+, 10 out of 10 books. So I'm really sorry if I ramble. I just have quite a lot to say about all this stuff. The Troop is a sort of horror sci-fi type. Not really sci-fi, but it's definitely a horror novel set on an island on which this troop of Boy Scouts are there with their Scoutmaster, and without giving too much away, there's like a man comes and breaks into their hut and brings this disease. It's basically a glorified tapeworm, kinda. I'm not going to say any more about it, because the way that this story unravels is absolutely stunning, and it's so scary, and it's so gross. The horror, the physical description in this book is so detailed and frightening, and it's truly makes you want to whitey, but in all the best ways. I loved it, and it was another 10 out of 10 for 1am book review, baby. I have no idea I was going to enjoy it as much as I did. It is my favourite horror, thriller, tension book I have read, probably, in fact, definitely all year. Incredibly, I don't think I've ever heard of Nick Cutter, but I will definitely be checking out what else he's got to offer after this book. Something I loved about this book was the presentation of it. It's presented, if you've ever read Carrie by Stephen King, you'll know that throughout that book there's sort of like newspaper clippings and like testimonial statements and stuff, so it's sort of presented like a documentary style. That's something that The Troop does as well, and it's so, God, it's just amazing. It's so cool. Like, that's like the best part. It's just such a cool story, and it's such a cool book, and it's so gross, and it's so beautiful, and it's so awesome. And I absolutely loved it, and I highly recommend you go check it out. I read it on Kindle because I couldn't find a paper copy of it anywhere. I do not let that stop you. Go and read The Troop. I did not think a horror story could make me feel so much emotion and just abject terror and panic. I was genuinely so scared for these characters, which is insane. I cannot say I felt like that for any book ever, and in the same way that I felt scared for these characters. These are just kids, and they are going through some shit. So I'll leave it at that, but The Troop, 100% recommend it. 10 out of 10 review, baby. I absolutely loved it. I could literally do a full review of this book and just talk about what made it so amazing. But I'm not going to because I don't have time. Alright, again with the Kindle, I actually watched the movie of this book first. Again, another book that a lot of people probably read in school, but I just caught the movie. It was on like Amazon Prime or something, and then I enjoyed the movie so much I decided I wanted to read the book. And of course, that book is Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. A classic, a true classic in every sense of the word, I would say. I feel like a lot of people are already familiar with Of Mice and Men, but if you're not, here's the rundown. Essentially, a very, very short book. I read it in like an hour and a half. It follows these two drifters named George and Lenny. George and Lenny. And George is sort of Lenny's caterer because Lenny has got these mental disabilities. It's never really explained what he has, but he's definitely he's mentally disabled in some way. And essentially the book just follows them getting a new job on a farm where Lenny, unfortunately, because of his disabilities and his misunderstanding of other people's behaviour and stuff like that, gets them both into a bit of trouble. And I won't spoil the ending, but I feel like a lot of people already know how this book ends, but truly the ending is so just heartbreaking and earth-shattering. I think because it's so short, it has so much more of an impact than if it was like a longer book. And that's not to say that long books can't have an impact, but this one really got me. We get emotional just thinking about it, man. Oh, okay, focus up. I think what really sells this story is the chemistry between George and Lenny. They have this amazing, really genuine chemistry. Like even though they aren't family, George does seem like an older brother or a sort of like father figure to Lenny, and the dialogue is just so well written, and especially Lenny's dialogue is it's just brilliantly written. I loved it so much. Oh man, just talking about this book makes me feel so. It's such a peaceful novel too. Like all the characters are so well developed. Even if they only have like 5 or 6 pages worth of time in the novel. I'm using the word powerful so much, but so many of the books I read were so powerful this month. It was a powerful month, guys. Okay. You have no excuse not to have read Of Mice and Men. It's genuinely like 26 pages long, and it's one of the greatest books ever written. I would say that Of Mice and Men and The Bell Jar have both found their way into my top 5 books of all time. They're just amazing. I think both of them are so human, and I think that's what makes them so special, is that they just understand humanity and they understand what it is to be human. And I'm getting too sentimental. Let's move on. 10 out of 10. Finally, the final book. I feel like I pure blasted through these ones, but I've got quite a lot to say about this one, so I'll just get right onto it. As some of you know, I think it was March, I read the Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea by Mishima, and of course I absolutely loved it. It's my favourite book of the year so far. In fact, no, it's not anymore, because The Bell Jar or Of Mice and Men are now my favourite books of the year so far. So I decided to read more Mishima, and the next one I went for, because it was a standalone, I didn't want to get into his big series, was The Temple of the Golden Pavilion, which I absolutely loved to bits and pieces. A little bit of Scottish humour for you there. Essentially, this is the story of a young boy named Mizoguchi, given by his father to work as I can't think of the word, but essentially a monk at the Golden Temple of the Golden Pavilion in Kyoto. I think that's in Japan. As time goes on, he serves his time working there at the temple in a very religiously quite restrictive position, a lot of responsibility to follow the word of the religion. He starts to feel that he is restricted by these rules, and he wants to break out, essentially emotionally and physically. After becoming friends with a boy at the university he goes to and discovering this sort of life outside of the temple, he decides that he is going to burn down the Temple of the Golden Pavilion. And that's all I'm going to say. I'm saying that so much this episode, but literally a lot of these books, the more that I give away, I think that the less that you'll enjoy them if you choose to read them. Again, it's so disturbing and dark, but so beautiful. This one reminded me a lot of Lolita in the way that it handles sort of human nature, kinda. Mizoguchi completely goes against his religion. He completely goes against his superior to work out this plan that he's going to burn down the Temple of the Golden Pavilion. And something that I love about Mishima's books is that a lot of people would probably call their endings anticlimactic, because they always end right as the climactic event happens, and we never see the aftermath. But I think that is so genius. I think that's such I just love it. It was the same with the Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea. We never find out what happens to Mizoguchi after burning down the temple. We only know that he does. And that is so cool. I absolutely love all the characters in this book. The fact that I remembered the main character's name, I think, goes to show that, because I never remember any characters' names in any book. The setting, Mishima has this real amazing way of describing just places and weather and stuff that might seem boring, but it's amazing. He just knows how to write about it and make it really interesting, and it's beautiful and haunting, and I absolutely loved it. I also just think it's amazing how Mishima understands, and I've heard this is a thing with a lot of Japanese authors, how they understand, they have this great understanding of human feeling and the psyche, and reading this, you really, that translates well to the page. I understood exactly what Mizoguchi's motives were, and it was like stepping into the brain of this little Asian child. Can't say I've ever said that one before. Highly recommend it. maybe don't start with this one because it is a little bit harder to get into and a little bit slower than The Sailor That Fell from Grace with the Sea. But if you're wanting to read more Asian literature, Mishima is fantastic. I cannot wait. I'm going to read Spring Snow and Runaway Horses soon, guys, I promise. And the Temple of the Golden Pavilion is getting a big fat 10 out of 10. Whatever. So that's it. Pretty much. That's all the books, guys. That's all the books for them. Oh, that's all the books for them. It's alive on my mic. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm sorry I've been away for a while and I totally forgot to do Spring of King. I know, sacrilege. Well, how could I do this to the fan? The reason behind that is that I read 5 books and I also just felt like I didn't really have anything to say about any of them. If you guys want to know what the books I read were, I will put a list here. The only one that I really had anything of note to say anything about was Rage, but simply because it was banned and put out of print, and I just thought that was really kind of interesting to talk about why I thought it was banned, even though it really wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Anyway, I don't really have much more to say. Wash your hands, make sure you wear your seatbelt, brush your teeth after you give a blowjob, if you're into that kind of thing. I'm straight. Getting with the saliva, man. I don't even have a TBR, but currently I am like halfway through Inherent Vice by Thomas Pynchon, who's one of my favorite postmodern authors, and I am planning on reading It by Stephen King this month. That's all I'm telling you, because that's all I've got planned. Oh, I'm also going to read The Picture of Dorian Gray and Jekyll and Hyde. Okay, bye-bye. What? Good lord. Are you okay? Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of 1am. Oh, shit. As you can see, I'm not wearing socks. I'm not sure why I'm telling you this.